and really build a system that creates scalable and reliable traction for our sales teams. Thank you. So winning more clients with an AI lead generation system. So buzzy words here, AI lead generation system. What the heck is that? Overall, the goal here is to build a scalable system with which you can attract more clients. So that's what we're going to dive in here today. I think about myself, I don't really need to mention anything in additional of what Michael already has mentioned. Also about Peakora, I think Michael already gave a good overview, a few things maybe to highlight. Work with more than 120 businesses in the past 4 years, both B2B SaaS, hardware side, service more complex, and also in the B2C world. And I think the most important thing to highlight about us, where you should really get a solid understanding, is, as Michael said it, we're not consultants and we're also not an agency. What we do, we call enablement. So that means it's specifically designed for startups where we come into an organization, we take a look at the business, understand what's going on, develop together with the client a roadmap on how to get from A to B, and then we also support in the implementation. So the goal is to give the direction to the client that they're sure they're running in the right direction with all the expertise from our experts, but then actually train the team and help them implement so that it has a lasting impact and they're not getting dependent on anyone. Today specifically, as mentioned, we're going to talk about the topic lead generation. This is the entire revenue growth system that we use at Peakora. So there are 6 areas which we cover: product market fit, lead generation, but also sales, customer success, CRM/sales efficiency, and leadership. And as mentioned, today we're going to have a deep dive into the lead gen topic. Now, to get started, I always love to have a quick look at the following slide. So what you see here are the 3 different stages of growth that every company has to go through. And I guess many of you today in the call are somewhere here at the middle or the end of the go-to-market stage, or already in the scaling and expansion stage. And it's important to understand that every single stage comes with its own milestones to reach, and hence also different structures, teams, and tactics that you're actually implementing and use to reach the next milestone. And specifically, when we talk about lead generation, it is something that accompanies us through all of those 3 stages, starting in the product market fit, where it's rather manual, hands-on, leveraging network partners, etc. But then latest in the go-to-market stage, when we need to improve our traction and then later scale, it is time to really put in the necessary foundations to do that correctly. And I think all of you already have some experience with that in one or another version. There are also different ways on how to create traction. Mainly, of course, we differentiate between inbound and outbound. And while inbound is a very valuable channel that definitely everyone should use, many companies focus rather on the outbound side in the beginning, or also from scaling, because this is something that you can really create out of your own effort, where when you put in more effort, you can also create more outcome, whereas inbound is often a way longer game and requires larger budgets with ads and everything. So today we're rather going to focus on the outbound side of lead generation. And before we talk about the future, how that actually looks today, I want to have a quick look at what are the most common problems businesses are actually facing when creating leads today. And I think if you are already familiar with the topic, you see yourself somewhere here in this slide. Either you have already tried buying data lists of prospects to then reach out. Maybe you're using databases like ZoomInfo, Discover.org. Eventually you have some all-in-one tools in place, like an Apollo or a Lemlist, or you tried working with agencies to support you in your lead generation efforts. Now, all those tools come with some pros and cons. Definitely some learnings that we already had, and most of you probably also had, is that buying data leads is mainly bad data, so something we should not do. Database is always a good start, but data you get from a purchase database is often used up very quickly when you drill down in a particular ideal customer profile, and also often those databases are only updating their data every 6 months. Then you have this all-in-one tools. I call them the Swiss Army knives. So they give you some leads. They allow you to qualify certain emails. They allow you to send out and engage with the contacts. Amazing tools for beginners. However, if you want to scale something like this at a later stage, you're going to end up having a lot of spam filter issues, conversion issues, and whoever worked with agencies often probably made the experience that there are only very few good ones that are costly, and also the good ones often turn into bad ones after a couple of months working with them. Michael told you before, I worked at Beekeeper. Back then, I was responsible for building up this entire outbound motion on a global scale. At the end, we built a system with which we produced up to 5,000 to 6,000 contacts every single month and sent over 35,000 emails every single month. There was free AI. You can imagine what kind of infrastructure you need to facilitate something like that. But it still did not help to overcome the following core problems that you see here at the bottom. So way too much manual work that is required to power any of those approaches you see here at the top. Often the data chaos when managing that much data, delivery issues that a lot of your outreach to your customer ends up in spam, having low reply rates of only 1% to 2%, and then having very high costs related to that by fixing all of those problems. So luckily, these days with the options we have, we don't need to rely on only on those tools anymore, but there are ways on how we can automate this almost completely and really build a system that creates scalable and reliable traction for our sales teams. And when we talk about this system, we refer to it as the AI lead generation system. And you're probably asking yourself, what exactly is this? So I'd just like to show you this slide that shows you the entire overview of what at the end such an AI lead generation system will be. So basically, it is a process that combines different tools with each other that are integrated. And there are mainly four things that you want to be able to do that. First, you want to be able to actually identify the targets in your market, so the target companies and the target contacts that you could potentially sell to. Second, you want to win the ability in-house in your own business to produce all of that information, meaning all the account information, but also all the contact information. Third, you want to be able to engage with those people through different channels, such as email, LinkedIn, or even others. And then at the last place, conversion, then you want to have a smart conversion strategy where you can reach out to those people to ultimately, of course, have a conversation with them and build new business. And in the coming slides now, I'll walk you through the very steps we usually take when we build up such a system with a client that you can also replicate yourself. So first step, market and target. So whenever you really want to start scaling your lead generation efforts, it is very important that you're highly targeted, right? This is not something that is only specific to lead generation. Whenever you enter the go-to-market stage and you want to scale the company, you need to have very clear ideal customer profiles. And eventually you also want to have defined a so-called beachhead market. So the core market where you really want to focus at, where you want to build a very strong brand awareness that will help you to win more clients quicker. Many companies face the challenge that they try to be everything for everyone and they end up being no one for and nothing for no one. And with lead generation, it's exactly the same. So whenever we want to do that in an effective manner, we need to make sure we have a solid focus on our ideal customer profiles and also understand in detail who are the buyer personas behind that we are actually targeting. Now, if this is not there, then this needs to be built up. If it's not perfect, then we perfectionize it. If you already have it, that's great. Because then in the second step, what we want to do is we want to leave the conceptual world of defining this and actually already get real data for it. So having these parameters clearly defined of who is your ideal customer profile, what we can do now is actually we can access public databases such as LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Google, Yellow Pages, and we put those parameters in place to get a real understanding for how big these markets actually are. So I don't want to have a guesstimate for how big a market is. I actually want to scrape all this account data out of those platforms so that I truly know, okay, market A has 2,000 accounts, which is interesting for me. Market B has 5,000 accounts. So we want to have the hard facts and numbers and the names of those accounts that we should actually target so that we can also make good decisions where to start. Now, once we have actually mapped out our potential market and we know exactly who we want to go after, here now the AI piece comes into place around the topic of data enrichment. So as I mentioned before, until late 2023, this entire world of data enrichment was very much dominated by those databases. So we would spend around 10 to 20K a year to get access to a database. At Beekeeper, at some point, we had 3 databases, and it was still not enough to really get all the data we want. We hired a virtual assistant team of 20 people in the background from the Philippines and Pakistan that then actually manually needed to complete our data because mostly it's incomplete. But luckily, since late 2023, this is now in the past because by then AI really made a progression where we can now fully rely on it to produce the needed data. And one tool that really spearheaded this effort is called Clay.com. And what separates Clay.com from pretty much everything else that you probably know before is that Clay.com is no database. Clay.com is basically an aggregator. So it sits at the top of every single other data source or outbound tool that exists, and it allows you to basically freshly produce all the data you need exactly in the very format you like to have it. And the best way to explain this is actually by just giving you a live demo and showing you how that works. You are seeing my screen here, is that right? Okay, perfect. So what you see here is a Clay table, okay? So imagine this is like an Excel table, but we have here 2 input columns at the very beginning, company name and domain name. And then here at the back, I have all the other data points that I actually want to have from this company, okay? So I don't go into a database and look for the data points that I need. I actually program here very custom every single data point that I want to have from this company and from this contact. Now, in the step before, we actually scraped all the account information that is relevant to us. So we can imagine we now have lists of hundreds of companies. We only need the company name and the domain. And we can just copy that simple information and we put it here into this Clay table with a copy paste. We can imagine that this now would be a couple hundred of records. And what is happening is that based on only those 2 data points, the tool already started fetching the data freshly together. So one thing that started is a so-called AI web search. So that means this very process that before salespeople were doing manually, meaning going on a website, reading information, making logical decisions, extracting information, all of this can be replaced by an AI web agent. So they went out and found the LinkedIn profile and it fed all the information here that I wanted to know, like industry, employees, country, year founded, and this is still running. So some information still gets completed. I can even look up technologies of this company that they might be using or might not be using. I get traffic information. I can even have AI analyze basically who the ideal customer profile is of that particular company. So also here, going on the website, reading what's there, summarize. And in that particular case, we also trained the AI to basically go out there and find the information about the CEO and founder. So name, job title, of course, also email and phone number and all of this. So just out of personal information reason, I'm now not showing here the email and the phone number, but all of that is possible, right? So even email, you can validate this 3 times in the background to reach the highest likelihood of actually finding a valid email address and the phone number. So the beauty here is, as you see, within seconds, I can now do what took me hours before. And I really get all the information that I actually want in the exact format that I need it. And you can build such tables completely the way you want, right? So what I showed you here before, this is really just one demo table that we built in our particular case. But of course, this will all be customized to every single client, right? So depending on what kind of buyer persona you're usually selling to, you would change here from CO to another person. You can also enrich 3 up to 5 or 10 people as much as you want. Per every single company. Good. I guess there will be some questions here, so happily to hop back into that at the end in the QA session. But I hope that that was enough information to show you how we can actually produce all of the information that we actually need. Now, let's imagine we have all the information, right? So with this technological advance, it's now way easier to produce all that contact and account information. But now the question is always, okay, what do we make out of this, right? And of course, here then the topic of conversion strategy comes up. So we now want a capability that we can produce all information of our buyer personas and ICPs. So it's this orange circle here in the middle. So when I now have all that information of my target market, the next thing I need to do is I need to build a targeted system that scales, right? That means a targeted system where through different conversion strategies, I can basically approach these buyer personas. And on the other hand, the entire infrastructure that is needed to do this, to also do that from different angles and different channels. Now, you probably all get all those annoying spam emails where people reach out to you completely cold and they say A, B, C, and they want to have a book. They want to try and book a call with you. Of course, no one is really reacting to that because it's not really truly providing you any meaningful value. So what most people don't understand is that, of course, the way you approach it and the conversion strategy you pick also heavily relies on the deal sizes that you're going after. So what you see here is something that we show quite often. It's a so-called go-to-market matrix. And it shows us the different go-to-market approaches in relation to the different average annual contract values. And it shows that there is actually only one go-to-market motion, which is the right one per deal size. So low touch would mean free trial, freemium. Medium touch would mean inside sales, field sales. And high touch is enterprise sales, account-based marketing. And that's basically the framework to use to design your entire go-to-market approach. But also then when it comes to the specific lead generation strategy, of course, has an impact because according to the deal size, your lead generation strategy also changes. So the lower the deal sizes, the more direct approach you would be because you really want to capture demand where it exists so you can close fast and you have low customer acquisition cost. And the higher the deal size is, the more you are also on the demand generation side where you need to have personal conversations, where you need to discover the issues, where you need to build awareness, and where a lot of personal effort is also needed to actually win such leads and ultimately clients. And there is basically an entire guideline of different strategies that you can use depending on the deal sizes that I show you here. I don't have time to explain everything in detail here, but basically, whenever you start focusing on that topic, this is what you need to take a close look at, right? So really understand that for the below 10K, where you're selling simple solutions and there is a clear pain value understanding, a more direct approach is taken. proposition. Then for larger but standardized solutions, the pain value understanding can happen with some guidance. So there you already need to offer more value also when reaching out to people, either through lead magnets, through events and fairs, etc. And then if you're above 50K, you're probably more selling complex and custom solutions where the pain value understanding needs investigation and also a lot of customization from your side, where in your email or in your lead generation efforts, you also need to offer a lot of exclusive value to motivate people to react, take in positions of thought leadership to be recognized as an expert in a certain industry. Now, I just want to give you some more concrete examples that you can imagine something behind that, right? In that very case, we call it the lead magnet strategy. We approach here the sales leader, Philip. And what we want to do is we want to identify some relevant data points about this client that are related to our solution we provide. We gather all this data and we have AI write a personalized message for us. We want to show some proof that what we actually promise we can also deliver. And then you want to offer something of value that has a very low barrier for Philip to react. And in this example, you see we're approaching Philip. We say, hey, Philip, I looked at your sales marketing team, about 15 people from what I see. I guess you must be under the pressure of bringing more leads into your funnel. So this is more like a low to mid-sized strategy. We specifically go for the pain point. How are you finding more accounts and leads? Are you do this manually or maybe using Apollo or LinkedIn? So I have data about his company. I even know what his kind of tools he's using. So I take the finger and put it a little bit into the wound. I say I have here a list of 500 target companies. Here's a sample of it. So I did not just train the AI to produce data for me, but it even learned about the prospect and created data for them. And I could insert it here as an example. And then we say we even have the contact information for those accounts. From what I'm guessing, you're looking to sell to insurance sales agents. Interested in learning how we did this. So this is like the offer with a low entry barrier. You can, of course, have the entire list as well. Just get back to us, right? So good example of a lead magnet. I approach Philip, I talk about the pain he most likely has, and I offer something of meaningful value to him. Everything completely automated. Others approaches you can pick are interview or market study strategies. So this is if you're either a rather young company or you're actually expanding in new markets. So you're saying you're doing a market study in a certain area. You approach the buyer personas for that. You conduct interviews where you learn a lot about the market and about the persona. If it's actually a good match, you can even offer them basically a solution demo in a second call. And out of all the insights you win, you can even create a small market study, use it to position you as a thought leader in a certain space. Also something that works really, really well. And the last example is the roundtable strategy. So that's something we would use if you're really selling more complex deals of higher deal sizes and also approaching C-level of larger companies. And that's very much a sophisticated strategy, which I cannot explain in its full length. But basically what you do here is you really create something of high value for a very specific audience. In this case, we approached banks and we organized roundtables only for digital innovation leaders of banks. So small event of 10 to 15 people, very exclusive, invite only. And if you then approach these people very specifically with this value proposition, they're like, oh, that's exactly me. That could truly be relevant to me. The trick here is that you don't just invite them to an event, but you actually create a reason why you should have a conversation with those people before the event is happening. So a pre-qualification meeting where they basically share all the insights and all the problems they have. And based on that, of course, you're already doing a discovery again. You can tailor the roundtable to their needs, and you can also offer already follow-up if you know that you can solve one of their problems. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I just want to give you like a little taste of what we understand as a conversion strategy. And if you figured really out what is the right approach for your deal sizes and your market, these are results here that are possible, right? So you see here, we're not talking about 1 to 2% reply rate anymore. If you check here, this screenshot from an engagement tool, we sent 643 emails. There were 3 emails per contact, so around 210 emails, and we got 88 positive replies. So we're suddenly talking here about positive reply rates of 40% instead of 2%. That's actually a real client example, a little bit a larger client selling deal sizes over 100K. We tracked everything over the past 12 months. With this approach, they now booked more than 400 calls, closed more than 800K in pilot revenue, which reflects an LTV of 8 million in their case. Now, one topic I want to dive in is also the topic of SDR agents. So these examples I showed you before are examples where I work with volume, right? I have the different markets, and now strategically I go after the different ICPs with different conversion strategies, trying to win them for a call. But with the advancements in AI, there's also now new possibilities, which we call signal-based prospecting. So an SDR agent is basically a fully automated workflow which measures a certain signal in the market. That could be a job change of a champion of a client of yours to a new company, or it could be a hire of a buyer persona into a target account of yours. It can be a new founding announcement, any kind of news, good or bad ratings on Google. Whatever it is that is measurable and relevant to your particular business and solution could be used as a trigger. And this trigger is measured. This information then is fed into Clay, this tool I showed you before. The necessary information there is produced. The lead can be automatically qualified along with your criteria. And then actually the information is sent to your CRM and also to your engagement tooling by email or LinkedIn, where you then actually reach out to the person. So fully automated workflows that now run without any person actually being involved. And that you can imagine this a little bit better. Here is an example of an agent that we at Peakora actually have running. We call it the newly funded SDR agent. For us, it's very relevant whenever a business actually does new funding or gets new funding. So there are platforms like deutschestartups.de, which of course write about it. So whenever they make a new post, we scrape this information through an RSS feed, and we basically feed that information through a webhook directly into our Clay system. Clay enriches the entire information. It qualifies the lead according to our own framework, along with our criteria for the ideal customer profiles. And then the information is actually sent into our HubSpot. So I think Johannes Tiefenthaler and Neustarch is actually also a portfolio company of Worth Ventures. So of course, we know when every time a fundraise is happening. And then from there, basically, automatically, the contact is enrolled in an email sequence where we reach out to the person and we congratulate them to the fundraise, and we offer something of true meaningful value, which in our case is a strategy session to take a look at where they're standing right now and what needs to happen next. So a very cool example of a completely automated workflow where no human is involved anymore. Everything is basically written and done through either AI or automation. And the reaction we get from people is actually quite good. So this SDR agent converts at around 12%. So that means more or less every 10th person we approach actually results in a strategy session. Why is this so good? Well, because it's personal, it's timely, very relevant to the person, and we really offer something that is truly valuable in the very situation they are in right now. Good. So we have now solved the part of the targeting. We know how we can produce all that data. We know what a conversion strategy is, and I think you have the understanding now that there are various different conversion strategies and that we need to find out what is the right one for you. So now to execute such a conversion strategy, you of course also need to have the right infrastructure. So here we dive into the engagement infrastructure. And you saw this slide already before. This is the system we want to build. Now, by having all that data available, we don't just want to completely cold reach out and knock on the doors of people directly and ask them for something. We have more time because we have the data. And the first thing we usually do here is we install LinkedIn automation that is creating network awareness. So that means your salespeople every single day connect with 20 up to 25 people of your target market on LinkedIn. Not trying to sell them, not even sending a message, just to connect so that they see the name Michael from Worth Ventures, so that when Michael posts any kind of content on LinkedIn, it's not Michael's friends, but it's actually the buyers who see his content. So this is basically what we call warming up the market, and this is how you can basically create brand awareness fully automated and attract people to your brand on a daily basis. The second layer is then the conversion strategy. So this is then where the conversion strategy is executed, be it now a roundtable, interview strategy, or a lead magnet, whatever it is. This is where we then approach the people. And now the difference is it's now not an email from Michael Blank, which I've never heard in my life that ends up in my inbox. It's like, Michael Blank? Do I know him? This name is somehow familiar, right? So the chances for the person to actually open up the email, read it, and respond are way higher, although it's basically still cold because the market is warmed up. And then the third element, then when you're more advanced already, this is then where you would start building the SDR agents and react on signals. So the entire mechanisms could look the following when we take a look at the yearly timeline. So the layer one, the network awareness, this system is once built, and now you only need to feed it with data, and it constantly basically creates traction towards your brand. Layer two is the conversion strategy. Maybe you have here one bigger per quarter or several small ones. Does not matter. It depends on your particular case, what makes sense. But this is where you approach the people specifically, trying to convert them by offering them something of meaningful value. And then layer three, these are the SDR agents, right? You cannot scale up the volume because the signal just happens as often as they happen. But every time it happens, then you have this workflow that is getting executed. And the more SDR agents you build, the more use cases, of course, the more volume you would have in this fully automated system. Honestly, most of our clients actually are just starting to build SDR agents because it's something completely new, which was not possible a couple months before. Already layer one and layer two that I showed you is plenty enough traction that is created here. Now, so this is then going back to the initial slide of the overall system and the email infrastructure or the entire infrastructure and how that looks like. At the beginning, we have the data source where it's either static, meaning we go after target accounts that we defined, or it's signal-based as shown before. All the data is fed into Clay, where the data is enriched. And from there, the data is integrated in whatever CRM you're using. It's very important because we're dealing with a lot of data. We want to make sure it's integrated with your single source of truth. So we know who did we already approach and who not, and who is a client and who not. And then from there, it goes into the engagement unit, which is then either reaching out through email or reaching out through LinkedIn or both. And then whatever returns come, of course, end up directly into your inbox, from where you then basically convert into a call and hopefully close the deal. Of course, this is now very quickly explained in the simplification of all that needs to be built. One thing that is definitely also very important is the topic of email delivery. So here, very important that certain basics are in place, that we create secondary domains. So you never do outbound, all-bound efforts with your primary domain. You have to have certain records installed. You need to stay under certain limits, like frequency limits when you approach certain markets. You should have email warming installed, and so on and so forth. And especially over the past months, also Google, Microsoft, and Outlook actually shared that they're using AI in their spam filtering. So that means if these days you're using rather cheap tooling like the sequencing feature of HubSpot or Apollo to send out emails and get in contact with people, chances are that your emails end up in spam at around 60% because these tools are just not the best at doing this. So I really recommend investing into professional tooling if you want to be successful with this. Now, some of you are probably asking, hey, how fast can one set this up? Because that's usually the first question I get. So I wanted to give you some more information about this around ROI and timeline. So to build a case and understand the situation also internally, here's some insights, right? Assuming you have 3 sales development representatives that are doing manual data enrichment and manual email outreach for about 1 hour per day only, that's already around 50K per year, which you lose on manual tasks that could actually be automated. Eventually, additionally, you still have around 10 to 20K yearly fee for a database you're using, or you're using an agency where you'll most likely spend around 30 to 60K a year. With what I showed you, you can pretty much get rid of almost all of this, right? Within the first 6 to 8 weeks, you will be able to build the core infrastructure and launch the first campaigns. So this infrastructure that I sent you or showed you of like data enrichment and engagement, this can be built within the first 6 to 8 weeks. Within overall 3 months, you will be able to fine-tune such a system, increase the level of AI personalization and automation, having everything very nicely integrated also with your CRM. And most likely within 6 months, your team should be fully trained to execute that autonomously, and you're already probably building the first couple SDR agents. So it's not such a huge timeline and effort to actually make this step, but it's basically a one-time effort you do compared to these huge amounts at the top that you actually spend every single year on that. And once you have such a system, you don't need any databases anymore, most likely. You don't have an agency that you need to pay anymore. And pretty much what you have done with 2 SDRs before can now be done with 2, still having better conversions. Now, there are plenty of examples. I added you here a bunch. I often get the questions, does it work for service? Does it work for SaaS? Does it work for hardware? We've done all of it. We've done it in pretty much all the industries. The only thing where I would draw a line is if you sell very, very, very small deal sizes, then most likely it just makes more sense to focus on inbound and ad strategies because it just from the deal size doesn't even make sense to talk to the person. But apart from that, it can pretty much work in every market.